Sunny Park guides an investigation into climatically responsive dwellings in Sunnyside in the year 2030. I started off by conducting genius loci mapping, looking at the multicultural and diasporic nature of Sunnyside as well as its 20th century built spatial legacies. Thereafter, I conducted a mapping exercise looking at the orientation of buildings, shadows cast by buildings, surface runoff, negative spaces in and around buildings, areas of safety, and so forth. Thereafter, I devised this insecurity matrix based on metric points devised by the city of Tshwane in its transition to a green economy report of 2016. Thereafter, I generated insecurity scores for 4 different regions on site. Firstly, the areas around Robert Sobukwe, then the areas around Spruitzich Park, then the residential areas around Bork, Leitz and Cilliers, of which my site towards the southwest was part, and finally the area around Sunny Park Mall. Thereafter, I aggregated these scores, giving the larger Sunnyside area insecurity score of 6 out of 10. Thereafter, I developed a character. My character is an itinerant worker from Central Africa who works from home as a call center operator. Thereafter, I looked at major design considerations, looking at when major climatic changes will be fully manifested, which is around the year 2030, as well as different scenarios in terms of how the climate might change, the lifespan of buildings, population growth, and GDP growth. So I decided to situate my project in the year 2030. Thereafter, I decided to make material selections looking at the criterion of affordability, climatic performance, as well as sustainability. And I decided on the use of cross-laminated timber technology. I then conducted a precedent study looking at university dorms in Melbourne, Australia by Jackson, Clements and Burrows, particularly because they made use of cross-laminated timber technology, the fact that Australia is climatically quite similar to South Africa, as well as the way in which they generated very free plans using cross-laminated timber technology. Thereafter, I devised a concept statement which deals with the idea of using technology and synthesizing that with climatic needs to create comfortable and aesthetic dwellings. This is the site which I selected, which is an existing public pool towards the southwest of the larger site. It's my intention to keep the current public pool whilst making interventions to the urban fabric in and around it, as well as using the wasted space around the pool for residential purposes. So I looked at the area around the pool which needs to be avoided. Thereafter, I looked at the trees on site and decided which of the trees need to be preserved. Thereafter, I looked at the necessary clearance from the road according to SAN standards. I then imposed a 5x5 structural grid placed in relation to the cardinal points. Thereafter, I looked at summer and winter shadow lines created by the surrounding buildings and how this would interact with the site. And from that, I then generated this constraint diagram. Using this constraint diagram, I then created very quick iterations of what can possibly be achieved on site. I then did the same thing in build form using models to explore different potentialities on site. Thereafter, I did some quick sketches of what the scheme could look like, as well as massing explorations. This was my interim site plan. This was a rough perspective, a rough elevation. Thereafter, I moved into my final presentation. So in terms of how my form was generated, I took a single dwelling. I then placed 10 dwellings next to each other. I then offset them from each other to create a bit of privacy, which also allows each dwelling to have 4 facades instead of 2. Thereafter, I scaled up the scheme to 4 stories. I feel like this is an appropriate density for Sunnyside, and this is based on the density of surrounding buildings. Thereafter, I offset all the dwellings towards the east to create overhangs, which then protects glazing from direct sunlight. Thereafter, I offset the rows of dwellings towards the northwest. Thereafter, I removed some of the dwellings, which allows for air to filter through the scheme. Thereafter, I slanted the roofs of the dwellings found at the top so that water can run off successfully, and I then changed the orientation of some of the dwellings. In terms of the major design components of the scheme, I'm keeping the existing pool as well as the pool office, pool maintenance yard, and so forth. Thereafter, I am suggesting that Pretoria develops a bicycle highway throughout the whole city, which then incentivizes users to make use of bicycles, which is a much cleaner form of transport than buses, taxis, or motor cars. Thereafter, I selected areas on site, which is then to be utilized or to be covered using foliage and greenery so as to minimize urban heat island effect. Thereafter, I suggest that a commercial zone is placed on the ground floor with a terraced garden towards the east. 2 towers for vertical circulation in the form of a staircase and elevator shaft is then placed on site. A screen is placed towards the east and south to generate privacy between pool goers and people living in the dwellings, as well as blocking harsh morning sun. Thereafter, passages are added for circulation, and then the dwellings are added. I generated 4 different dwelling typologies. Some of them are single room, some of them are double room, all fitting into the larger 8.5 by 8.5 module, generating dwellings that are roughly 70 square meters big. This is then my ground floor plan. This is the bicycle highway which passes through the site. This is a bicycle parking area on site. I'm also proposing that a series of these parkings are placed throughout the city, which keeps the bicycles of users safe while they go to work or go shopping or so forth. This is then the existing pool, and the sort of contained area of the pool is made smaller so as to create a more generous public offering to the surrounding pedestrians. This is then where the commercial zone is located on the ground floor, as well as dwellings on the first, second, and third floors. In this render towards the left, you can see the bicycle parking. Here from the east, you can see what the scheme will look like from above. As you can see, the screen isn't utilized everywhere. Trees can serve a similar function to what the screen is intended to do. So the screen is only used in areas where trees currently do not exist, or in areas where trees will struggle to grow. As you can see, solar panels are placed on all buildings, as well as water tanks for the collection of rainwater. Planter boxes are placed along all horizontal circulation. The reason for the planter boxes is it provides a way of concealing services, since it will be quite difficult to place service ducts within the dwelling, so the services are rather placed within the horizontal circulation. The form of the staircase takes inspiration from the concrete staircases of some of the surrounding buildings. Similarly, the typeface used for the dwelling takes inspiration from some of the 70s type seen in surrounding structures. The screen wraps around one of the dwellings towards the southern edge, creating a perceived cantilever for a bit of architectural interest. A dynamic edge is created, leading users in towards the public pool. Instead of having a fence or a wall between the dwelling and the public pool, a hard wall is created for a softer boundary. All windows are recessed so that very little direct sunlight falls directly on the glazing. As you can see, here's overhangs created towards the west, which also then aims at blocking sunlight onto the structures. As you can see, small gardens are placed sporadically between buildings. All dwellings are covered in or clad in inverted box rib. This is done because it's a light material which reflects sunlight, although the material will be powder coated so it does not create glare for those living around this scheme. Pink is used as an accent color. This is done for the reason that quite a bit of greenery and foliage is present, and pink is a complementary color of green. The entrance to the dwelling is on the ground floor next to the commercial zone. On this section, you can see that trees on the terraced garden will only be found away from the slab of the commercial zone, since the they will need quite a bit of space for their roots. So much smaller foliage like grasses are placed on top of the slab, used as the roof for the commercial zone. Then openings in the floor panels, as well as the fact that the windows are placed high up within the dwellings, allows for cold air from within the cool courtyard space to move into the dwellings and out at the top, creating constant movement of cool air. The spaces between the dwellings also allows for sufficient cross ventilation. And here you can see towards the east, the screen blocks glare and harsh sunlight, and towards the west, the overhang is used to protect all glazing. Come take it easy at Sunny Pool Heights. Thank you very much.